Alright, we've all seen it. That one scene where all of the characters are stating their motivations and goals and Fiora just yells shulk. She's the easiest party member to dismiss as just a shallow love interest, and while I would personally sell my soul to make her not refer to her family as shulk and the others, that doesn't mean I'm willing to brush off the rest of her character. In fact, I really love Fiora. She's one of the characters who stuck out to me the most, and I've begun to understand why that is more and more over time. I mean, of course, there is the fact that she's really cool, and I adore her dynamics with the rest of the cast, but there's so much more to be found when looking at her mindset and how she fits into the greater context of the Xenoblade series. Her ideology has always been based around empathy and progress, and the specifics of it are not just simple or personal ideas. They become the foundational backbone of the entire trilogy, and are consistently called back to within every entry to a much further extent than you might expect. If you found Fiora to be a shallow or underwhelming character, or if you're just interested in a broad analysis of each Xenoblade game, then you've come to the right place. I'm Phantom Hype, and as someone in narrative design and psych, I want to dive into the big ideas of the series and how Fiora is at the very heart of them. If you've been around here, you know I've already covered Xenoblade 1 pretty extensively, so I'll keep the overview for it more brief. The game has a strong message about perspective, as the characters learn to understand the people around them and live more authentically. While the villains remain caught up in the past, the future, or their problems, the main party members start to accept the uncertainty of moving forward. And of course, Fiora is central to all of these ideas. In Xenoblade 1, she is put in a situation where she has literally every reason to give up. As a half-Homs, half-Mechon, she doesn't feel like she fits in with either of the two nations, and she has to live with the uncertainty that her body could just give out and cause her death at any moment. If that wasn't enough, there's also the fact that she has a whole lifetime's worth of regret to ruminate about, as it was her own decision to play the hero in Colony 9 that put her in this position. She's haunted by the past, disconnected from the present, and afraid of the future. It is these kinds of fears, anxieties, and regrets that cause characters like Egil, Zanza, Mumkar, and even Shulk to spiral. However, Fiora is different. She is the catalyst for change, the one character who advocates for another way, and the sole reason everything ends up getting better. From the very beginning of the game, Fiora is a highly empathetic character who reads people easily and isn't afraid to take initiative or speak her mind, all traits that she uses to make a positive impact on the people around her. It also allows her to take on a playful side, as she understands and predicts people's behavioral patterns very easily. For example, she knew that Shulk and Ryan would forget the ether cylinders, and decided to wait at their destination with the cylinders to surprise them, stating that she would feel better going with them than sitting around and worrying. This moment is especially important when you consider how many other characters in this game have the flaw of failing to take action because they're too worried. Meanwhile, Fiora is having absolutely none of that. She calls out Dunban when he mentions using the Monado despite knowing it will hurt him. She sees through Ryan's overconfident protector act, and she's willing to communicate to Shulk when he's being apathetic. She's constantly pushing the people around her to make better choices and take care of themselves. Her general personality already sets the stage for a character who embodies progress and authenticity, but we can also connect these ideas to the plot structure as a whole. When Fiora is around, the characters are always growing and being challenged, as her values keep them in line. When she isn't, that's when we start to see fear and projection take hold. Fiora's death is what makes the characters finally turn toward revenge. Even if Dunban insists that Fiora would never have wanted it, her death enables the characters to fully dehumanize the Mechonis and pressure others to do the same. I've talked about this multiple times, but Melia is really the key example here of how harmful this is. Melia knew that revenge would not bring her peace, as she destroyed the Telethia that took out her companions and it didn't really help her feel better. However, Shulk's insistence that she needs to seek revenge convinces her to put her people aside and focus on blaming and destroying Mechonis anyway. Vengeance is a distraction that keeps everyone from resolving their actual issues, and without Fiora around, no one is willing to challenge these questionable goals in a meaningful way. Her death was necessary for everyone to start spiraling. You can probably see where I'm going with this, as Fiora returning to the main story marks a major shift in the main party's goals. As soon as Shulk finds out she's alive, he switches from angrily screaming at and attacking the Mechon, even despite Nemesis's cries to stop, to deciding he doesn't want to fight or harm anyone anymore. Fiora's very existence as a face Mechon challenges his entire worldview, as he is forced to accept that the beings he is fighting are real people. Not only that, but people he doesn't understand or know anything about. She is living proof that his angry, close-minded worldview is incorrect, and she's the entire reason Shulk is forced to grapple with that. Even after everything she's been through, Fiora continues to advocate for empathy and peace when she returns to the party. When Dunban aggressively interrogates the Machina, she insists that they are good people despite them being different. Instead of giving in to Shulk's anger towards Mayneth, she stands up for Mayneth and explains that there is more to the situation, even when she herself doesn't even know what Mayneth's goals were. The thing about Fiora is that she's again uniquely good at understanding people. She may have only known Mayneth from her forced possession, which is something that could reasonably make Fiora hate Mayneth. However, Fiora still recognizes that Mayneth is kind and caring through seeing her gentle demeanor, her consideration for Fiora's wishes, and her insistence upon talking as opposed to fighting. While Shulk can often jump to angry conclusions about others, Fiora consistently looks beyond surface level and sees the good in people who deserve it, even when put into situations where anyone else wouldn't. She can see people's essence as opposed to just their actions. None of this is to say that Fiora is perfect, as she still struggles with negative thoughts and doesn't always extend the same kindness to herself. Her extreme empathy is likely a response to her needing to grow up quickly and look after the people around her, as she is constantly seen taking care of others despite being orphaned from a young age. Throughout the game, she slowly finds healthier ways to implement these traits though. A key difference as she develops is that she stops calling people out in a more bossy way and starts instead helping them reach the right conclusions on their own. Take for example the argument with Shulk in the lab where she yells at him for being insensitive, versus the disagreement on Fallen Arm where she openly discusses her feelings until Shulk naturally concludes that he wants to help Mayneth as well. I think Mechonis Core is the biggest example of Fiora's ability to see the best in others. I don't see many people point out the fact that the question of whether or not to kill Egil has more stakes for Fiora than for Shulk. It's because of Egil that Fiora lost her life, her home, and her body, and yet Shulk is the one holding a blade to Egil while Fiora thinks about the situation carefully and tries to convince Shulk to stop. Even after everything she's been through, she understands the intentions of both sides. She understands that Egil and Shulk are exactly the same, and she understands that their fighting does nothing but drag out pointless suffering. She doesn't defend or justify any of the harmful behavior, but she picks up on the cyclical nature of it and realizes the importance of breaking out of it instead of letting fear control everyone. Her own actions reflect her mindset as well, as she insists to fight until her last moments instead of letting the fear of her own death paralyze her. That brings me to the closing acts of the game, where everything finally comes together. Fiora's consistent pushes for empathy and authenticity are what eventually lead to the cross between cultures as well as a decision to embrace the future. During the Battle of Dixon, she personally advocates for a world where everyone can live hand in hand, the same one that she taught the party about in Agniratha and actively fought for at Mechonis Core. As a half-Homs, half-Mechon, she has a uniquely compelling ability to bring the warring cultures together, which is exactly what ends up happening. It is only by combining the technology of the Homs and the Machina that her body is able to be restored. Empathy and progress literally give her a future. Fiora also leads the discussion about the future in memory space, where, once again, her mindset from the beginning of the game is highlighted. Rather than sitting around worrying, she talks about living life as it comes and how the little things are what create meaning and value. It was the little things that she appreciated in her life that helped her overcome her impossible situations, and she used what she learned to create a better world for both herself and the people around her. I've somehow gotten this far without talking about Xenoblade 2 at all, but trust me, I've got a lot to say about this one. The game is based around the idea of moving on from the past through forming healthier relationships. The existence of Torna already sets the stage, as we literally have a full prequel game set 500 years ago that's seen as this idealized golden era that many characters have yet to move on from. And then in the base game, you can really notice a clear pattern just from looking at the cast and how conflict is resolved. The villains in Xenoblade 2 are all part of one big depressing cycle. Amalthus began to lose his faith in humanity after finding out a man he saved the life of ended up attempting to kill an innocent family. His views only got worse as more experiences piled up, until he ended up hating the world and becoming destructive himself. It leads to him hurting other people in the same way he was hurt, such as Jin, who spiraled into becoming similarly unhealthy and destructive after losing Laura to one of Amalthus's attacks. It isn't just Jin, though, as Malos was also heavily influenced by Amalthus. As Amalthus's blade, Malos inherits Amalthus's hatred for humanity and becomes unable to see himself as anything more than a monstrous weapon. Then, Malos launches these major attacks that hurt even more people. It's a huge web where each villain's mindset and actions pass their suffering onto others, creating an endless cycle of resentment that overshadows the chance for improvement or self-reflection. Many of the main party members have similar problems, except they're able to find healthier people who push them to recover instead of just enabling their spiral. Mithra actually has the same problem as Malos, where she struggles to see herself as more than just a weapon. Her mindset was heavily reinforced by Adam, who had been afraid of Mithra. She couldn't really be herself while he was constantly telling her to hold back, so naturally she ended up on a little bit of a rampage when she could no longer keep everything in. It's a huge contrast from her later relationship with Rex, where Rex was unaware of Mithra being an Aegis and simply supported and cared for her unconditionally as another person. It gives her an environment where she can actually be herself and grow instead of having to hide and act perfect all the time. Nia is the same, as she also felt the constant need to hide and repress her true self until Rex helped her come out and realize that people would still love her regardless. It puts Rex and Amalthus on opposite ends of a spectrum, where Amalthus is a harmful and pessimistic person who keeps traumatized people stuck under his control, while Rex is able to see them for who they are and push them to make better choices for themselves. The entire game is centered around these relationships, to the point where the objective of the game is completely meaningless. Xenoblade 2 is literally about the friends we made along the way, as Rex acknowledges that reaching Elysium alone would be pointless, and eventually discovers that there's nothing left of it anyway. There is no magical, perfect place you can go to that will fix all your problems, but that's okay, because you can find that peace in yourself and your friends. Okay, so you might be thinking, yeah, that's cool, but what does literally any of this have to do with Fiora? And I would say that Fiora plays a pretty similar role to Rex in Xenoblade 1. As I talked about earlier, she is that positive, supportive, and understanding presence that helps the people around her grow and move forward. In fact, her ability to do exactly that is the reason why she was brought back to begin with. In Agniratha, Vinaya talks about how she specifically transferred Maynard's soul into Fiora due to her being close to Shulk. She saw what happened when Arglist had to deal with the Monado alone, and wanted to make sure that the tragedy of he who wields the Monado was not repeated. Something I've talked about pretty extensively on this channel is that Zanza's Monado tends to work as this massive allegory for fear. It shows visions of terrible possibilities that end up putting Shulk into a constant state of anxiety paralysis, while also framing the Mechon as an evil source of all these problems and encouraging vengeance to make things better. It's a huge burden to bear, and it's one that debilitates and isolates the wielder. That's where Fiora comes in. Unlike Arglist, Shulk has Fiora there to challenge the Monado's influence and help ground him. Whenever Shulk gets too angry, she's always there to help him think more rationally. When he's off on his own overthinking a million things, she's there to talk to him and offer support. It's because of her that Shulk learns to express empathy better over time, as she stands up to his biased views and encourages him to see the perspectives of people he had previously dismissed. It's because of her that Shulk learns to grapple with his own wishes and values instead of remaining focused on revenge as a distraction. Vinaya chose Fiora to play the same role for Shulk that Rex did for Pyra and Nia. It isn't just Shulk that she helps either, though. She's the only character that Dunban feels comfortable opening up to, as he knows he can cry around her instead of needing to maintain his perfect mentor image. He becomes much more stable after they reconnect, and is able to handle Dixon's betrayal in a much healthier way compared to Mumkar's. Fiora and Melia confide in each other as well, and she's quick to point out how much Ryan had grown while she was gone. She just has this incredibly positive presence that brings out the best in the people around her and helps them stay on the right path. Just like Rex, it is through her positivity and ability to see and help others that so much progress is able to happen. And with that, we're finally on to Xenoblade 3. This game definitely has a lot of different ideas it pushes, but they tie together pretty cohesively. For the first half of the game, there's this huge focus on the party learning to appreciate life itself. Having grown up in a cruel system where they had no time to explore themselves, the characters never really got the chance to find value in living. It's why reaching the city manages to be such a profound sequence, as it's the first time where they see people able to just have fun and do what they enjoy. Even something as simple as seeing kids running around in a park manages to feel so incredibly special. Noah and the rest of the cast are finally seeing a system that allows people to have just a little bit more freedom, and it's everything they could ever want. The focus on the system here is important, as it is the source of all of the game's major conflicts. It is literally the villain as well, as Mobius are the people running the system, And Manana even explicitly states that maybe the world itself is the real supervillain. It keeps people stuck and too consumed with fighting to grow as individuals, causing no real progress to ever be made. And then everyone who doesn't fit the ideal fighter mold desired by the system ends up suffering. Just look at Shania and Yorin, who struggled due to physical differences and an interest in art. This cycle is why nothing in Ionios ever changes. People die and then come right back after. The same battles happen over and over again. The same relationships end and restart. The exceptions to the rule end up burned for their differences. No one can move forward, and time is frozen, both literally and metaphorically. That's why changing the people in power isn't enough. Noah has to literally destroy and recreate the world, or the system itself. Everything naturally plays toward the idea of change and progress, but there is another really important aspect here, that being legacy. Everything that Noah and Mio have been working toward is built off of the effort of past generations. It was all set in stone by the people who came before them, which Future Redeem will make sure you don't forget about. Noah is literally using a sword that is now confirmed by the art book to be made up of Fiora, Pyra, and Mithra, in a world administered by Shulk, Rex, and Alvis. Even the Ouroboros stones were engineered by Nia, and the fight against Mobius itself followed off of everything Matthew set into motion. That said, the past isn't overemphasized, as the point is to move forward. That's a huge part of why Xenoblade 3 base game's main party and regions aren't too Xenoblade 1 and 2 centric, and it's also why Noah discards Lucky 7 in the end. In the Ionios Moments art book, Takahashi described this moment as Noah thanking the sword and returning it to Origin, liberating it so that everyone can finally move on to the new world. Noah still doesn't know if everything is going to work out, as it's still possible that Origin could fail or that the main characters could be separated forever, but he has to accept that uncertainty is a part of letting go. The entire game taught him that taking that chance is still better than remaining stuck in a world where he is barely even living. It neatly wraps up the game's messages into a big cohesive statement, which is that a harmful system can hold back your life, but it's possible to change it, move forward, and face the uncertainty of letting go, while still respecting and building off the legacies of everyone who came before you. You know, I think that's something we could all use right about now. Anyway, Fiora's relevance is a lot less subtle this time around, as again, the art book confirmed that she literally is the Lucky 7 sword that Noah wields. In an early scene, Taion talks about the idea of dreams being carried on through objects, and Fiora is no exception in this case. It's her same dream of embracing uncertainty and creating a new world free of control that ends up being the conclusion that Noah comes to. Her legacy lives on through him, but her connection still goes further. In Xenoblade 1 itself, legacy is a huge part of Fiora's character. In contrast to Shulk seeing Zanza's visions of the future, Fiora inherited Mainet's memories of the past. She is the only party member who has a real attachment to the past generation, and she embraces that position, using it to help teach and empathize with other people. Everything that she is able to accomplish is based on those who came before her. There's Vanea, who saw what happened to Arglis and brought Fiora back to prevent that tragedy from repeating, and there's Mainet, who saw the harm that Zanza's manipulation was causing and helped Fiora understand the perspective of the Mechanists to finally stop the cycle of war. Fiora carries on their dreams, using her knowledge of the past to create a world where those same issues don't have to be repeated. She works to fulfill Mainet's wish, even if Mainet herself couldn't be there to see it. Like Noah, she embodies legacy, progress, and letting go, no matter how hard that may be. The last thing I want to talk about is the Trinity processor, because yes, I can make anything about Fiora. I explain the mechanical side of it a lot more in my Trinity analysis video, so I'll be brief in that department here, but each Xenoblade game sets up a Trinity processor dynamic. In Xenoblade 2, Mithra is Numa, Malos is Logos, and the Architect fulfills a similar role to Ontos. In Xenoblade 3, Ouroboros is tied to Numa, Mobius is tied to Logos, and Origin is tied to Ontos. And lastly, Xenoblade 1 has Maineth playing Numa's role, Zanza playing Logos' role, and Alvis is directly confirmed to be Ontos. That's a lot of words, but if you look at the ideologies held by these characters, you'll notice that they all line up with each other. The Numa characters, Mithra, Ouroboros, and Maineth, all learn to let go of uncertainty and move on to the future. The Logos characters, Zanza, Malos, and Mobius, all seek control and prevent progress out of fear. And the Ontos characters, Alvis, the Architect, and Origin, are all neutral yet all-powerful figures who act off the input of the other two. The important part for this analysis, though, is that Maineth and Zanza are different from the others. They both are defeated before accomplishing their goals, leading their roles to be passed down to Fiora and Shulk respectively. That's why we see Shulk and Fiora glowing and being described as their successors. It makes a lot of sense. Fiora has continuously pushed for Maynard's goal of moving forward, while Shulk has suffered a great deal of the paranoia and fear that motivates Sansa's goal of control. I want to avoid getting too mechanical in this video though, so back to the point. It's the Numa characters who end up convincing Logos of their ways in every single Xenoblade game, eventually resulting in the creation of a new world. And Fiora is the first in this pattern to ever do it. Holding Numa's values, it's Fiora who encouraged the party to see the perspectives of other people. It's Fiora who stands in the end and encourages everyone to move forward one day at a time. It's Fiora who carried the legacy of an entire generation in order to build a better future. And finally, it's Fiora whose ideology has now become the defining conclusion to every game in this series. For those of you who made it this far, it means a lot to me. I may have my gripes with her, but I absolutely adore Fiora, which I don't know why I'm even clarifying that at this point, like hi, fork found in the kitchen, but I hope more people will be able to see her in a new light. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like, comment, or subscribed, as I do actually read every comment I get, and I really enjoy hearing everyone's perspectives. I'll be continuing to make this kind of content in the future, though I will be talking about a game other than Xenoblade next time, which I'm super excited about. Lastly, huge shout out to my best friend Clay for proofreading my scripts. He's an artist and is working on a big Ultra Kill video essay right now, so go check him out if you're interested, and I'll put his channel in the description. For now though, thanks again for watching and do take care.